Hi guys, in the upcoming video we'll be writing a program which is more like a game, and I'm gonna call that the brick breaker. And the whole idea is we're gonna have a couple of tiles, or let's say bricks, right on the top of the screen. Then we'll have a ball which bounces off the floor and goes up to the screen. But of course, if we allow that to fall on the floor, it's gonna count as a game over. So we'll make sure to have a paddle, and that paddle is gonna do the job of protecting it or blocking it out from hitting the ground. Once it hits the ground, it's game over. But then when it touches a tile on the top, that tile disappears and a score is added to us. So your job is to move. We are going to be binding the movement of our paddle with the left and right arrow. So your job is to keep the balance, to block it from falling using your left and right arrow, and ensure it doesn't hit the floor. So once it hits the floor, it displays game over, and of course the game stops there. But if you successfully clear every tile, which is the brick, then it's gonna give you some congratulatory message. So let's hit scratch and begin to program this game. Alright guys, welcome back. So this is Scratch, and as you all know, we are supposed to start with this sprite, which is the cat. So but of course, from the description of the game we might not be needing this, so I'm gonna take it down very quickly. I'm gonna go to the sprite list and bring on the ball. Then next I'm gonna bring in the paddle and start off from there. So this is the paddle. Where is that? Okay, so now we have the paddle and the ball. I'm gonna go and start scooting against the ball. So for the ball, when clicked, which is when we start our program, when you hit the green flag, I'd like the size to become a little bit smaller, and that's gonna be at, let me say, I'm gonna set the size to 30%. So I'll just scroll down from the looks and figure the palette that says set size, then change that to 30%. So this is 30%. Then I also want it to be 30% smaller, and I want it to go to the center. So I'm gonna go to motion because that deals with movements. Pick the one that says go to X and Y. At the X, I'm gonna set it to 0, and Y also set to 0. So this ensures it starts from the middle, right? So next I'm gonna go to point in direction, and if you make a movement, it's gonna move in line with the direction where it's pointed. So I'm gonna move to the one that says point in direction 90, but I want it to pick some random directions. So I'm gonna go to the operators and pick the operator that says pick random. So this is the operator. I'll fix it here. Then I'm gonna start from negative 180 to 180. So why am I doing this? It's important that I start from negative 180 to 180 because if we look at how direction is measured, you see when you point directly left, when you point directly right, you're pointing at 90. If you point directly upwards, this becomes 0. I could set it manually to 0. But if you have an anti-clockwise rotation, it's going to give you some negative values, as you can see. So this is going to rotate way up to negative 180. And if we move back again, back to 0, and from the clockwise rotations, is going to give me positive values. So this is the reason why I've chosen to start from negative 180, rotate way around back to 180. So with this, it picks some random values falling within that range. Okay, so now that I'm done with that, next I'm gonna go over to my controls and pick a forever loop because I want this action to happen forever. So I'm gonna click on forever, and what do I want to do here? All I want is this should start moving, and when it bounces off the edge, it should bounce. So once it hits the edge, it's gonna bounce back. So to do that, I'm gonna go to movement or motions again and pick the one that says move 10 steps. So with move 10 steps, the ball is gonna start moving. This is what it does. So it starts moving 10 steps, if you can see, but that's not all we need. We just want it to bounce off when it hits the edge. So I'm gonna go to the one that says if edge bounce. So if I pick this and also put it in the forever, what happens is this keeps happening over and over. So it keeps taking that 10 steps, and whenever it bounces off an edge, it bounces back. So this is what we have. The ball is moving randomly on this stage. I'd like to set the paddle to write some code for the paddle, and this is gonna be simple. So I simply activate the paddle by clicking on that. Now move over to click events, which is when we start a program. So one of the things I also want to do for the paddle is to make it smaller. So I'm gonna go to looks and pick the one that says set size. So that's always to change the size of sprites. So now I'm gonna make it 70%, so it's just a little bit smaller than it is. Next, I want to pin it at a position that is a Y position, so I don't want it to go up or down. I just want it to be at that position. So I'm gonna go to motions and get the one that says set Y, because Y controls our up and down movement. So I'm gonna set Y. So I'd like you to be careful, because a lot of people make the mistake of saying change Y when they're supposed to set Y. A little on that, I'll discuss more on the difference between set and change, because I see a lot of my students making mistakes with that. So I want to set size to -170. So let's test this. If I run this, you see it's just positioned way above the floor. So now I want to bind the movement, the left and right movement, to left and right arrow. So what I have to do is to go to controls and pick the forever. So now we have a forever. I'm gonna say if we press the right arrow. So if we press, that is on sensing because it's a sense. So I'm gonna go to sensing and pick the one that says key space pressed. So now because there's a drop down arrow, I'm gonna drop this and choose the right. So I want the left for now. So if key left is pressed, left arrow is pressed, all I want to do is to change the X position, because the X actually controls left and right movement. So I'm going to change the X position, and of course, if you remember, negative values makes it move from wherever it is to the left. So I'm going to say change X by, let me just give it -15. Okay, so -15, and I'm going to duplicate exactly this code for the right arrow. So this is here and I put this here. All I need to do is drop these from left to right, and if that is done, you watch that if we start our program, okay, so the value is supposed to be, for the right, I'm supposed to have 15. So when we start the program, if you click and run this program, you're gonna notice that I'm actually pressing the left arrow, and pressing the right arrow makes it move left and right, and it's just pinned at that position. So but we still have a problem. The problem we have is this sprite now goes way off the screen, and let me expand so we'll see what we are doing. So if I try to run this, you see it actually goes way off the screen, and that's not what we want to do. So all I'm going to do to fix that is to go and say if on edge. So I need an if statement again, which is on control. So if touching edge. So what this means is if what we've done causes this to touch an edge, we want an action to be triggered. So I'm gonna go to touching and not choose mouse pointer. So let me put this out again, since I'm gonna reuse this. So if touching edge, I'm gonna go to the motions and undo what I've just done here. So for here, I'm changing X by 15. All I want to do is to change X by -15. That is to say it goes and it's undone, right? So this might happen so fast that we might not really see the effect, but that's exactly what it does. So I'm gonna say -15 because we went 15, so this should be -15. I just want to duplicate this so I have the exact same copy for this. Now pay attention to the positioning because that matters a lot. It is inside the if statement, so this is more like a nested if. So for when we are having 15, I'm changing by -15, and when we are having -15, I should leave this at 15. Okay, so let's test this now. I'm gonna stop and start the program again. Now if I move this to the left, the moment, oh whoa, hold on, something seems wrong. So we are changing by 15 if touching. Okay, what I actually did is if touching mouse pointer, but I meant the edge. So I'm gonna drop that down to edge, if touching edge. So let's see what happens now. Okay, I'm gonna run this again. Now observe that, okay, let me stop and start again. Oh, something goes wrong. Okay, so let me stop the whole program. I guess I need to manually drag this out for it to start in the first place. So let me start. So now it's fine. It actually moves, and when it's approaching the edge it stops. More like it happens so fast that it's difficult for us to picture what is happening. So it hits the edge and it bounces back, but that is a very fast action. Like I said, we can't really see that in action. So with this now, we've been able to protect it from going way off the screen and limit it just within the screen. Alright, right now we are done with the code for the paddle, and I'd like to go back to the ball. Moving back to the ball, I just want the ball to do one thing, and that is whenever it falls below the position of our paddle, it should broadcast game over, right? So how are we gonna do that? I'm gonna still go over to events and pick when clicked, right? Let me make this smaller by clicking on this so I have enough room. So when clicked, I still need a forever loop because I want this event to listen for this forever. So what do I want to do? I'm gonna use an if statement, and that if statement is gonna say whenever this position of our ball falls below the position of the ball, we want to announce game over, right? So of course it's the Y position, that's what we are dealing with. So I'm gonna go to the Y position. Let me make this smaller so I can have more rooms. Okay, so I'm gonna say whenever the Y position is less than the Y position of the paddle, it should broadcast game over, or it should announce game over, because what that means is our paddle is not able to block it out from falling. So I'll move to motions and pick Y position. But before I do that, because I want to do an operation which is a math operation, I'm gonna do a math comparison which is a less than. I have to go to operators and pick the option that says something less than 50, right? Then move back to our motions and get the Y position. So I'm gonna say Y positions, and this is referring to the Y position of our ball because the ball is active. Now is less than -170. If you remember, I set the position, the Y position of our paddle to -170. So if you click on that, you see when we're doing initialization, which is more like doing the initial setup, we set it to -170. So if the ball falls below -170, what it means is the ball has gone below, it's gonna fall, right? So we simply want to announce game over at that point. So to announce game over, because we are not going to be handling the code for the game over right inside our ball, so I simply announce game over, and the sprite that is responsible for handling all of the activities for game over takes it off from there. So I'm gonna go to controls and pick the one that says, I think that should be under events. So I'm gonna pick the one that says broadcast. So now instead of broadcasting a message, I simply want to write my own custom message. So I'll drop this and pick new message. Now I'm gonna type game over. Game over. So once that happens, once it falls below that, it announces game over. Alright, so one more thing I'd like to do to the ball is I would like the ball to, if you watch what we have already, playing this game, it's just moving erratically on the screen, and the problem we have is it falls on the paddle and the paddle is not able to bounce it off. So we would like it to bounce off whenever it hits the paddle. So if you watch, let me try getting it, it still falls through on the paddle. So that is not desirable. What we want is once it falls on the paddle, it should change its direction and begin to point upwards. That is, it should deflect or reflect that and begin to move up. So let me write a code for that. I'm still gonna go to my events and pick when clicked, because I want that to start listening immediately. We'll start the program. So when clicked, I'm gonna go to this forever again and pick the option that says if touching. So if it touches the paddle, right? So remember, all I'm writing is still on the ball. So I'm gonna go to the option that still says if, and now the condition I'm gonna bring in is touching paddle. So I'll go to sensing and bring the one that says touching and drop this to be paddle. So when it touches the paddle, I want the direction to change. So all I need to do is go to motions pick the one that says point in direction 90, but now customize it to be, I'm gonna go to operators, pick the minus operator. Now this is a little bit of geometry. If you have a bit of geometry knowledge, you know, if this is falling this way, given that the angle is measured from like let's say we have a vertical bar and the angle measures from here. So if you take away 180 from, because 180 is more like an angle on a straight line, so if we have an angle subtended, let's say 30, and we do 180 minus 30, is going to point this other way, more like giving us the impression that this has reflected, right? A reflection. So if it falls this way and you do 180 minus 90, the direction will be changed to this, and if it's falling from this side, you protect it, so once it hits this, its direction changes and begins to go up this way. So that is the property I'm going to be using. I'll type in 180 minus here I'm going to point the direction. So the direction is actually a variable that is provided by Scratch itself, and what it does is it tells us the direction to which any sprite is pointed at. So if we retrieve the value and we say 180 minus that direction, it makes this bounce off once it hits on the surface of our paddle. So let's test that and see if it does exactly what we said. So look at that, it just bounced on the paddle and it didn't fall through again, right? So far we have the paddle, we have the ball, and the ball moves randomly on the screen while our paddle is responsible for blocking it from falling. But when it falls, we are supposed to have a logic that says game over, which is not yet in place, right? Now to write the logic for game over, I'll be needing a new sprite, and this time around I'm not gonna load from I'm not gonna load from the price list from the sprite list. Instead, I'm gonna come to the option that says paint. So once I click paint, it gives me an option to do a lot of operations, especially related to graphic design. But what I'm interested in is the one that says type. So I'm gonna type because I actually want it to be a typeface. So now once I click on the canvas, I'll go ahead and type game over. Alright, so I might need to give it a little bit of customization. One, I have to go to the selection tool, then select all of these shapes and move it to the center. So I'd like the crosshead to be at the crosshead of the center. That is one. Secondly, maybe I would like to expand that and make it a bit bigger. So that is expanded and probably a bit bigger. Now I would like to make changes to the color. So I'll go to fill and make it red, more because game over is something we don't want. So normally we label this with reds. So this is more saturated and I've made it a bit darker. So just tweak this to get what you want. Once you're done with that, let it go, and now pick the option that says typeface. So once you select the type, it allows you to check to select the fonts. So I'm gonna go up here and pick a font I like. There are a lot of fonts, but I think I particularly like the one that looks like Pixel. So that's the one I'm gonna pick, making it look more like we are on game. So this is how we get these sprites. And once I'm done, I'm gonna move away from costumes, because when you load from paint, it's gonna take you to costumes. So you just have to move away to the code, so you're able to add codes to that. Now what am I going to do with these sprites? Of course, I'm gonna go to when clicked. So I'm gonna go to events and pick the one that says when clicked, which is always when we start our program. If we start the program, I just want this to be at the center. So I'm gonna go to the one that says go to and also move it to the center. So with this, it goes to the center. If I set this to 0 and this also sets to 0. Okay, so that's the first. Secondly, I don't want this to be visible at first, so I'm gonna go to looks and hide it, right? So I'm gonna pick the option that says hide. So what this does is when we start our program, because it doesn't make sense that we start a program and the game over is already visible. So when we start the program, everything is hidden and we go with the progression of our code. So Next, we could expect this to come when the game over is broadcasted. Remember the code we wrote about the ball, where we said if okay, that was this. If the ball's WAR position is less than 170, it should broadcast game over. So this other one is gonna receive game over, because if there's a broadcast, there should be a receiver, right? So I'll still go to controls and look for the option that says when I receive game over. So that is this. It's not in controls, that is in that happens to be in event. So on the event that I receive game over is available because I typed game over, right? You could choose any other, just in case you have a lot of broadcasts, you're gonna drop that down to choose the actual one you mean. So now when I receive game over, that is when I want this guy to become visible. What that means is when the ball falls below this, which announces game over, this should hear game over and become visible. So I'm gonna go to looks again and pick the option that says show. With this now, I'll run my game again, stop and start. So when I start, the program is actually hidden, but the moment it touches the ground, we find out this says game over. So I'm going to try a bit to protect this from falling. So you see it doesn't say game over until it falls. So I guess now is the right time to allow that to fall. So the moment it hits the ground, game over is displayed. But we still have a problem because that displays and the game continues to play. So what we might need to do is to stop all the processes. So to stop all the processes, I'm going to go to controls and pick the one that says stop all. Right, stop all. So what it means is stop everything happening in the background. So when I click this, look at this. Of course, once it hits the ground, everything stops. I'm gonna try to protect it from falling, and it goes okay. It somehow succeeds in falling. So I'll block it. Okay. Anyway, what happens is just that it falls on the ground, and it's of course when the ball falls on the ground, it's gonna broadcast game over. Then our game over sprite hears that and becomes visible, and of course goes ahead to stop this. Okay, so far we already have a working game, but we need somehow to bring in the bricks which will be hitting against and taking down. So now I'm gonna go to sprite list and choose a sprite. So I'll click this. Now what I need is the buttons, the option that says button 2. So I'm gonna be changing the name of that to bricks. So to change the name is just click on the sprite and make that bricks. I think that's CK, right? So let me have that as break. Then maybe somehow for the game over, I should also have that as game over. Okay, so back to what we're doing on the bricks. All I need to do is when clicked, I'd like to adjust the size and give it some initial setups. So one of the setups is gonna be when clicked, I simply want it to become half the size. So of course this we should go to looks and pick set size. Probably I think setting the size to 100%, I mean to 50% should do exactly what we need. So I'll set size to 50 and that should be fine. So size is set to 50. Next I'm gonna go to positioning, and what I want is, okay, let me test this. So this is the size is 50, and I want it to go to this position precisely. So observe that as I move this from wherever it is, the Y positions and the X positions are kind of changing. So if you look at this position, which is the X position, is very close to 200. So I'm gonna leave that as minus 200. So that does that for me. Minus 200 is fine by me, but I feel it should still go up a little bit. So moving it up a little bit, we are gonna see that changes to close to 163, and I'd like to set this now to 160 because that's also close to 160, just to make it a round number. So I'm gonna have 160 here, and that's done. So with that, I think I'm fine with the position, and because I've gotten this precisely from here, I can now go over to the motion and pick a palette that is gonna do that for me, which is go to, because I adjusted it there, it also auto adjusts itself here. Otherwise you can still customize this to have this. So this is that. I want it to get to that position, and I also want it to be hidden. Right, there's a good reason why I'm doing this, and I'm gonna explain that just in a moment. So I want it to move to that position where it is. I want the size to be 50%, and I want this to be hidden. Okay, so why I want this to be hidden is because I'd like to create clones of or copies of this. So when we say clone, all I just mean is creating an exact copy, something that looks exactly like it, right? Basically the code I'm going to be writing for this should work for the clones, but slightly they're going to behave differently, and that is where I'm going to do this. So I'm going to go to controls and pick the one that says when I start as a clone. So what it means is if we create clones of this stuff, when I start as a clone, it's also an event handler. So on the event that this is a clone, the first thing I want it to do is to become visible. So I'm gonna say show. So I'll move to this. So what am I doing? Actually, what I'm doing is I'm hiding the original seed or the brick and making the clones visible, and you're going to find out why I'm doing that just in a moment. Okay, so this is what I've done. Now I'm gonna go to events again and pick when clicked, which is when we start the program. So this serves us more just like the initialization. So I'm gonna go to when clicked, and if this is clicked or when we start our program, I want to go into a definite loop. Now what do I mean by definite loop? We have infinite loops, which is the forever loop. It runs infinitely, and our infinite means for as long as our program is running. We have the definite loop. This is a loop that runs a definite number of times, and we also have the indefinite loop. So that is what we call the condition controlled loop. So what controls that kind of loop is actually a condition being satisfied or not. So you can't ahead of time say this is going to run 4 times or 5 times. It's controlled by the condition, right? But what I want is the one that is definite. So I want to run this a definite number of times. So what do I want to run a definite number of times? I simply want to create clones of this, and I want that to go 7 times. So I'm going to do what? Create clones of myself. So I'll pick this, but I'd like us to look at this in isolation. So I'm gonna click this in isolation and observe what happens. So when I click this, that is triggered, but me looking at this, it doesn't seem like something has happened. But if you begin to pull away from this, you now see we've created 7 copies which are clone, and of course the our original brick is actually hidden. So if you count, we are going to have 7 of them, and this is not desirable. We don't want to just have 7 of them stacked on top of each other. So what I would do is to stop. I'm gonna stop this and start again, right? So let me put this together, and okay, before I put that together, observe that it stacked itself on top of each other. So what I want to do is when it's creating those clones should be created next to each other, not stacked on each other. So what I would do is I'll simply go to changing X position. So what I do is to motions, and I'll change X by 65. So what happens is the invisible loop, that invisible brick, which is hidden somewhere here, creates a copy, and it moves hiddenly, like it moves in a way that we don't see it because it's hidden. But when it gets to the next position, it creates another copy, and it makes another move to another position, and it creates another copy, and it moves to another position until it completes that is 7 times. So what I'm going to do is to manually or programmatically change the position. So I'm going to set or change, not set, I'm going to change the X position by 65. So with this now, let's observe what happens. I'm going to change this by 65 and run the program again. Nope. So this should be 65. Alright, so when I click on this again, this is what happens. So it creates Okay, that is game over and it stops all. So if I run this again, 7 copies of this is created, so it clones it 7 times, and because it hits the floor, that is game over. Now if I want to have 3 rows or 4 rows of this, then I'm going to repeat the whole of this process, because this is the process that is responsible for creating those 7 clones. So if I want to do this 3 more times, that is have 3 rows, I'm simply going to go to controls and still pick a definite loop. Now I want this loop to run 3 times. So all I'm saying is everything that happens here should also happen 3 times. So I'm going to put this out and put this inside of it. Okay, so let's try. If I run this is created 7 times, and observe that, okay, I need to divorce the broadcaster from the broadcasting what it does. So where is that? If this goes below, so I'm gonna pull out, or maybe let me have it where it was. No, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. Okay, so what am I trying to do? All I want to do is to have this in place so it doesn't broadcast game over, so we're able to inspect what the output is for our game. So I'm going to run this again, and this creates, okay, so even if it hits the ground, it doesn't broadcast game over, but observe that that process is repeated 3 times, but it continues the creation right to the left. That is not what we want. We want by the time 7 is created, if it's going to start the next one, we want it to start from where it started. So to fix that, I'm going to go to this inner loop, just below the inner loop, and set X back to where it started. So I'm resetting X back to where it started, which was minus 200. So I'm going to scroll down to set X and now put it at negative 200. But even at that, we are still going to have a problem. So I'll set this to negative 200, and it feels like part of our code is fixed, but we'll have some other problem to deal with. So this is going to be negative 200. I'll stop and play this again. Okay. All right. Okay. Not quite it. I see what is happening. Yes, so this is fine, and this should be 3. We have to adjust this to 3. So we need this 3. This did what it did, so we are setting X back to 200. Now I'm gonna run this again, and each time this goes, it sets X back to 200, but I feel something is still wrong. Oh, I see what is happening. So it's supposed to be negative 200, so I'm going to set X back to negative 200. Sorry about that. Okay, so when X is set to negative 200, that means we return it back to where it started. I'm going to run this again. This goes, and it returns back to where it started, right? Now it looks to us like we just did what we did earlier, but what happens is, because it starts from 200, it actually creates 3 copies because it's running 3 times, and because we are starting at the same point, those 3 copies are again stacked on each other. So this is 3 copies, and that is not what we want. So because we return this, the X back to negative 200, which is starting from where it started the first time, we also want to drop the X, that is the Y, we want to drop that a bit to the next line. So to achieve that, I'm going to tweak the Y position. So I'm going to go to set Y position or change Y position. So we are going to use change because that is what actually takes away from what we have. I'm going to change Y position by just 30. Again, remember to make it negative, otherwise you have the same problem I had earlier. Okay, so let's try this. If I try this now, I'm going to stop this and start again. Observe that it creates 3 different rows and each 7. So what is responsible for creating the 7 is this, but setting X to negative 200 returns it to the position where it started, but again changing Y by 30 makes it move down to the next line. So it creates here, moves line down, creates another, moves down, creates another. Okay, So that's about creating our clones. So far we already have a working game, but it still has a lot of flaws. For instance, we see our ball goes through the bricks and nothing happens. It does the job of falling on the ground and letting us know that this is game over. But that is not all we need. What we need now is each time it hits a brick, we want it to bounce back from there instead of going in. And the other stuff we would like it to do is when it hits a brick, we would like that brick to disappear. So let's do the code for that. I'm gonna come to when we have forever. One says if touching paddle, point in direction 180 minus direction. So I'm gonna pull this out, make a duplicate, and just customize that to give me exactly what I need. So one of these is when touching paddle, the other is gonna be when touching brick. So when it touches the brick, the same logic, if it's falling and it touches the paddle, it changes and goes up, it changes direction. So the same thing happens when it touches a brick. If it's going up and it touches a brick, it's gonna change its direction and reflect in the other way. So let me try that. If we run this, okay, that's game over already. So when this hits the brick, you find out it turns without necessarily going in like it did before. So it hits the brick and it turns from there. Let me stop that and play that again. I don't think it started at a very good angle. Oh, that's game over. Okay, so I'm not able to keep up anyway, but so it hits the brick and okay, that's game over. Okay, so once it hits the brick, it reflects from there. So the other stuff would like to do is any brick it touches disappears, and that logic I'd like to embed in the bricks itself. So I'll write that against the clones. Those are the ones that are visible to us. So I'm gonna go to controls and still pick a forever, and this listens to that event. So if touching ball, because that's the ball we are using, I'm gonna use an if inside this. So if touching ball, I want to delete that clone. So I'm gonna go to touching and choose ball and make that disappear. So if touching ball, I want it to disappear. So go over to controls, pick the option that says delete this clone. So this is this. Now let's test the game and see what we have so far. If I play this, it starts, but each time it touches a clone, that clone disappears from the screen. Okay, not only disappearing from the screen, it also changes the direction of that clone, and that is exactly what we want. So this hits on that and bounces off, taking down some clones, and we are getting closer to what we need, but not quite there. So just a few more improvements, then we go. We already have a functional game which plays, but I'd like to add a couple of things, and one of those things I'd like is to have a background. So I'm gonna click on this, simply choose from a background, and for me, one of my favorite background is the one that says stars black. So I should use this as my background. And now I'm gonna go over to I also like to display a message when you successfully clear all the stages. So what I'm going to be doing about that is to simply do what I did in getting our game over. So I'm gonna paint, so I'll simply use my text and say something like breaks, or let's say all breaks cleared. Right, so we could just have all bricks cleared, and of course I feel this is a good thing, so I'd like it to have a green color, and let me get it more saturated and make it darker. Okay, so this is fine by me, and I'd also like to change the font to what we had before, so this becomes all bricks cleared. Now this is a new brick, and I'm gonna say win as the name, so I'm simply gonna use it as a win. Now to write code against this, maybe I should move this to the center, but to write code against that, I simply need to have it highlighted like it is, and I'll go to codes. Under codes, I'm gonna write when clicked, which is when we start our program. When clicked, the first thing I want it to do is I want it to just go to the center. So I'm gonna go to center, and going to center means going to 0, 0. So I'm assigning 0, 0 here, which is the center. And let me test that out. I'm clicking this so it goes to the center. But one thing is it wasn't centered right from where we created that, and I'm gonna go back to that. Select this and move it to the center. So just watch out for the crosshead. When it aligns with this, it's already at the center. So that's fine. And I'm coming back to the code, and I'll click this again. It goes to the center. So one of the things we want to do is to make sure this is hidden right from the onset, so it's not like it's displaying you win or all bricks cleared when you've not done that. So to do that, I'm going to hide it from the onset, and after I hide that, I'm going to wait until. So I'm going to controls to pick the one that says wait until. So what am I going to wait until? To do that, I would like to declare a new variable which I'm going to call scores. So I'll make a new variable and call that scores, or whatever you want. So it's just a counter, or we could call that counter, right? So we could just call this counter and leave it there. So before we do anything, you want counter to be 0. So each time we start, counter is set to 0, and this is going to wait until counter is equals 21. So why am I using 21? Observe that when we laid our bricks, we actually had 7 bricks in a row, and that was in 3 rows. So 7 multiplied by 3 is going to give us 21. So I'm simply going to wait until all the bricks are cleared, right? So that's why I'm using wait until score is equals 21. So I'll go to operators and pick the one that says equality, put it here, and pick score from the variable, put it there, and that was counter. I think I need to delete the one that is score. So this should be gone. I don't need this. So it's gonna wait until counter is equals 21, which means until we've successfully cleared everything on the screen. But if I run this, nothing is gonna happen. So wait until counter is equals 21. Then once it's 21, it should just show itself. And finally, it has to wait for maybe just a sec. And so I want it to wait for some sec. Probably I'm gonna say wait for 0.5 sec, 0.5 sec, or let me just say, yeah, 0.5 should be fine. Then stop all. So once it waits for 0.5 sec, it stops all the processes. Okay, now how are we gonna get our counter to be equals 21? That means each time a brick disappears, we would like to add 1 to that counter. So this is already there. So all I did to get to this point was to pick change score, not change score. Okay, so let me delete this. All I want for this is change counter by 1. So I'm gonna pick counter. Counter was 1, so I'm gonna be changing counter by 1 each time the ball is deleted. So remember, once the ball hits a brick from the code we've written here, that brick disappears. So after disappearing the bricks, or before disappearance of the brick, I simply want to increase the value of our counter by 1. So that ensures that it starts from 0 and counts way up to 21. So by the time it's all cleared, we must have gotten 21, and that is when our win comes to view. So let's go again. Win is supposed to be invisible, and I'm hiding this again. So this is a good one, right? So I'm gonna play and try my best to be able to clear all of these. Oh, I lost. So let me try again because I want to verify this works. I lost again. That is fast. So I'm gonna try to clear all of these, right? And once I successfully do that, it should tell us the cleared should become visible. I just hope I don't miss this, but if I do, then you can play that and see if there's an error. Just drop the error in the comment section. And if you like this game, please subscribe to my channel, and also recommend people to subscribe to this. This is inspired by some of my students. I teach people how to do Scratch programming, Python programming, and other programming languages, right, to do some other stuffs. So some of my students actually requested I do this video for them on this topic, because this is one of. So if you'd like to subscribe or to join, so I failed. All right, let me play that again. Okay, so simply playing this and trying to, but I have a sense, okay, this fails again. So what you're gonna do for me is play the game enough, find out if there's an error, and let me know in the comment section. I'll actually take that down. And if you feel there's a game you'd like us to develop using Scratch, please leave that on the comment section. I'll do well to respond to that. Thank you guys. Okay, so this is a game over again. So one more thing before I forget, just uncheck this and that is gone. It doesn't really look good that we have a variable on the screen, so I want to hide that and not block out from the experience we have playing our game. So it's expected that when you play this completely, that should be gone. So thank you. Let's meet in other videos.